Podcast with your host, Jake Weaver. Engineered by Cedric Swan. Hey, everybody. We're back with another episode of Midnight on Earth. I'm your host, Jake Weaver, and we're here to bring you more knowledge, more light, and more love. We have an amazing guest today, Mr. Dale Kaczmarek, president of the Ghost Research Society. It's been around since 1977. We have so much to talk about. It's going to be an amazing episode. But first, I need you to follow me on Instagram at midnight_on_earth. That is the address. You can go there, follow us, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you go to get your podcasts. Please click the follow button that connects us so you know when the next episode drops. You know, whatever we're doing, you get a notification. And most importantly, please tell a friend, tell someone that you know that loves these type of podcasts that would be interested in the Ghost Research Society. Talk to those people. Let them know we're here. Word of mouth. It's how we spread. midnightonearth.com. Okay, so we're about to talk to Dale Kaczmarek. But first, we got to read his bio. Dale Kaczmarek is a ghost hunter, paranormal investigator, and president of Chicago's Ghost Research Society. The Ghost Research Society was conceived in 1977 by Martin V. Riccardo, and was originally called the Ghost Trackers Club. At that time, Dale Kaczmarek was its research director. Its members were from all walks of life, but mostly those who just shared an interest in ghost research, hauntings, and poltergeist phenomena. In 1982, Dale Kaczmarek was given full ownership of the Ghost Research Society and became its president. Dale's been actively investigating paranormal phenomena since 1975, although his interest goes far beyond that. He has worked with psychics who help to complement his investigations, whether local or out of state, and has conducted many investigations concerning ghost lights, haunted houses, battlefields, cemeteries, Indian burial grounds, murder sites, churches, and sacred sites. Whoa. He's the author of Windy City Ghosts and Windy City Ghosts 2, which deals with the strange and unusual sightings in and around Chicago. Other books include A Field Guide to Spirit Photography, Illuminating the Darkness, The Mystery of Spook Lights, Field Guide to Ghost Hunting Techniques, and Field Guide to Haunted Highways and Bridges. He has contributed a chapter for a book released by Bantam called True Tales of the Unknown, the Uninvited. Ooh, that sounds scary. And several chapters for Dead Zones, released by Warner Books and both edited by Sharon Jarvis. He is also the publisher of Ghost Research Society Press, which produces and publishes fine quality books on the paranormal, mysterious, and supernatural since 2004, and is also the host of Chasing Spirits and the Paranormal with Dale Kaczmarek on Live Paranormal's Facebook channel bi-weekly on Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. Central. And that began May 12th, 2021. And since 1977, the Ghost Research Society is still active, still working to uncover the mysteries of the paranormal world. And we are very honored to have him with us. Hello, Dale. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for that nice introduction there.
Well, it's your life. It's your story. You did the work. So, but thank you. Thank you. We really appreciate you being on the show.
My pleasure.
Well, there's so much to talk about because you've been interested since 1975. Ghost Research Society has been going on since 1977. We can talk about a bunch of different things today, but the first thing I really want to talk about is, from your perspective, what is a ghost?
Well, that's a good question, because there are many different interpretations of a ghost, depending who you talk to. It's always been my interpretation that a ghost is a disembodied spirit of a once living person that for some reason hasn't quite made the transition from this world to the other side. And it's often due, at least in our research, the most often repeated scenario seems to be untimely death. Murder, suicide, car crash, a train crash, plane wreck, a drive-by shooting, a drowning, something that perhaps you weren't supposed to leave the earth when you did. And in many cases, these are violence that's perpetrated upon somebody by somebody else. So what happens in many of those cases, just like many of the major motion pictures that have been produced, is that the spirit may not realize that he or she has passed on because of the suddenness of their expiration, so to speak. They're here one moment, they're gone the next, and they sometimes simply find themselves in what I call in an earthbound scenario. Now, Hollywood has done a really nice job in recent years with movies like Patrick Swayze and Demi Moore in Ghost, Bruce Willis in Sixth Sense, and even Nicole Kidman in The Others. And all those people that were, all those stars I just mentioned that were in those motion pictures later became ghosts and did not realize that they were ghosts because of the way they died. And in many cases, sudden and violent death. So Hollywood has really gotten much better in interpreting what ghosts really are.
So how does that work when you think about spirituality and the different religions and how they teach us that the soul has this journey that, depending on what spiritual belief structure you find yourself in, you could be reincarnated, you could be going to a heaven type scenario, but there's always this underlying concept of the soul's journey, like the soul leaving, graduating, or going on to another life, going to heaven, going to hell. But yet there's this residual energy that seems to be in place, and it's accessing the third dimension. It's interacting with people like you. Why is that? How does that come together?
Well, see, I was raised a Catholic, and as a 6 or 7 year old child, I was always told that there's a heaven, there's a hell, and the Catholic religion says it's a purgatory, something in between. And the way they explained it to a 6 or 7 year old child was that you are not good enough for heaven, but you're not bad enough for hell. So you're kind of like put in a holding pattern, so to speak. That was not their exact words. I'm kind of paraphrasing it. I never quite understood it, but I never questioned, an authority figure. Now, later on in life, as I got involved in ghost research, in fact, I was a chaplain's assistant when I was in the Army from 1972 to 74. I was actually... it actually makes more sense now, because now if you're talking about an earthbound spirit, they're not in heaven, they're not in hell, they haven't moved on, they're in our dimension, so maybe they're in their own self-made purgatory. And I think that can apply to a lot of these apparitions that people see, whether they be residual in nature or even an intelligent haunt. I think Einstein said it very eloquently that the energy cannot be created nor destroyed. It simply changes form. So the energies that are within our body, which are a measurable energy, but what happens to that when we die? It doesn't dissipate. It doesn't go away. It can't be created nor destroyed. So it does live on. So a lot of people might call that the soul, if you will, when you leave your body. And that's why you go on to whatever awaits you in the afterlife, whether it's heaven, hell, purgatory for a time being, or even an altered state of consciousness, a higher elevation of frequency. I mean, we don't know. But there are lots of people that have been in contact and have had communications with spirits. I have investigated almost 4,100 cases.
Wow.
in roughly 46 years of doing this work. So you can see I've been very active. So, I mean, I've come across both what I believe to be residual and both to be intelligent haunts. In fact, I've seen quite a number of spirits myself.
So you think that some of these people are in some sort of limbo type of purgatory, transitory dimension where they're not quite in the next place and they're not quite here. And also there are spiritual entities that you've interacted with that aren't necessarily ghosts, but their consciousness, they're some sort of living consciousness existing in a different dimension.
Absolutely. And, there are other reasons why spirits come back too. I mean, there can be spirits, and we have determined this through research, through interactions with other people, with working with professional psychics that I've worked with in the past, that in some cases, spirits that have completely crossed over, they may have free will to come back and drop in.
Oh, wow.
They're called drop-in spirits. They're called visitation apparitions. They might come in simply to drop in. There might be a friend or a family member who has passed, and they're just trying to, check in on you. They might even be what's called a crisis apparition, where at the moment of crisis, maybe you might call it a guardian angel, you might call it a friendly spirit, you might call it a family spirit, intercedes during some sort of impending danger. An example, you might be coming up to a green light. You got the green light and something in your head says stop. So you stop. It's at that moment somebody blows through the red light. If you would have continued on, you probably would have been hurt or killed or seriously injured. So perhaps somebody is out there watching out for you. So there are other ways that they come back. They might come back for unfinished business. They might come back to perhaps show where an undiscovered will or money or stuff like that is left behind, just so they can finish their work and then move on themselves. But other times they are simply emotionally tied to, and I won't say an attachment. I hate that word, really.
Right.
I think they're emotionally attached in some way, or emotionally, I see, so use the word attachment, but emotionally tied to a person or a loved one or even a family heirloom or a house that they have lived in. And in some cases, that can be a residual. In some cases, that can be an intelligent.
I guess you could say connected. They still feel connected to something.
Absolutely.
So all of these cases, 4,100, holy cow, I'm still trying to wrap my head around that. So when did your interest in the paranormal begin?
At a very, very young age. I can really kind of blame my parents and grandparents for telling me that stories when I was a youngster. Because that's really what started me. My dad especially, I've never actually, found out exactly how, what my genealogy is, but I know my parents, my grandparents on both sides of the family were Polish, so I'm almost 100% Polish. And, my grandparents came from Poland, and they often told me as a youngster Polish ghost stories. And I still remember a lot of these. They're pretty creepy. My mom and dad, as they were dating back in the late 1930s, just prior to World War II. My dad was actually a merchant marine and served in World War II. And about that time in Chicago, a very famous story started to circulate about a cemetery called Resurrection Cemetery, a hitchhiking ghost story, and they dubbed her Resurrection Mary. And so my dad, being kind of the ghost hunter, as you call it in the family, thought he wanted to see for himself if there was something to the story. He had heard the stories, but he wanted to see for himself. So on a Saturday night, when he was dating my mom, they would go out to a movie, a dinner, a show, a museum, whatever the case may be. But on the way back, 12 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, they'd ride around the cemetery in the middle of the night looking for the ghost. Much to the chagrin of my mom, who was absolutely terrified, didn't want any part of this. My dad was, oh no, she's around here somewhere. We're going to find her. And kept riding around and riding. It was pitch dark back in the 1930s. And that was the very first ghost story I was told as a youngster. And my mom told me that. And it kind of set me on the path to later, discovering if some of these stories that I was told as a youngster were true stories, were they urban legends, were they old wives' tales or something like this. And that's what really kind of got me into the field, to try to not so much debunk, but just to find out if what they were telling me was true or not.
Well, it sounds like it was in your blood. Your dad was very interested in ghost hunting, and here you are all these years later fulfilling that dream and embodying that.
Yeah, I wish he was still around. I mean, he died quite young, unfortunately. I think he would have been proud of my accomplishments, because he actually was a musician himself, and he had composed for a lot of big name people at the time back in the 50s. So there's kind of that spark within the family, to find out or discover what lies beyond death's door. And that's what really kind of got me involved, because my entering into the field was to prove the existence of life after death. So I figured if I could in some way definitively and scientifically prove that ghosts existed, then I would say that you could prove that life after death existed, because there's a survival of the spirit, or the soul, if you will, after the death of the body.
Right. Yeah, that would be hard proof right there if you were able to actually prove that ghosts were real. I mean, we know they're real. I mean, I don't see how you couldn't say they were real after all your experiences. You already know they're real. It's just that hard proof that people need in order to really cross over into understanding that this is real. So tell me, though, what was your first experience with a paranormal entity or some type of ghost where it was like number one? You said you had 4,400 or somewhere around there, over 4,000. What was number one?
Well, I will say, when I first started out, I mean, I had very little equipment to document what I was doing. Back in the 70s, there was none of the equipment that you see in the market today. Now, I was using a 35 millimeter camera, a Polaroid camera, a cassette tape recorder, and my EMF meter was a compass. That's how archaic it was back then. So, I mean, I literally went on, when I started, back in the mid-1970s, and even before that, like I said, I was a chaplain's assistant in the Army, and I was even talking ghosts back then to the chaplains, which is kind of interesting, too, their perspective. But it took me, actually, I would say at least 20 years or so before I actually had my first encounter that I could actually say was something I could say is definitive.
Really?
And
20 years. I had
taken a lot of interesting pictures using infrared film. They're also, up on my website that people can actually see what I caught back in the 1970s of shadowy figures that were not there when I took the image. This was before the digital technology, so you had film cameras, so you didn't know if you got anything to develop the film. Now you get that instant picture. But going back to your question, I'm really not quite sure which one actually came first, but I mean, there were some homes that we had investigated back in the early 1980s, 1982, 83, with a professional psychic I worked with called Pat Schenberg, who at that time was the president of the Illinois Society for Psychic Research. And she was a gifted psychic, and she was one of those real deals, I call them. So we had went to several private homes, and we had went to Bachelor's Grove Cemetery. Now, when we went to Bachelor's Grove Cemetery, basically she had picked up stuff that she had no way of knowing. Absolutely. She had never been there. She lived in Morris, Illinois, which is a good more than an hour and a half away, maybe further. She had never seen the location. She was picking up these things. And that, to me, was spine tingling, that she was seeing things clairvoyantly, like almost right in front of me, and I couldn't see them. And I just got goosebumps when I was there, because it was so interesting to work with a psychic. But I had been into a home. I can't give the exact the name, but it was in Oak Park, Illinois at the time. And we were investigating this home, and it seemed like these the husband and wife, who normally were just happy-go-lucky people, suddenly turned very violent to each other. In fact, one afternoon, the wife picked up a very heavy iron and threw it at her husband and just missed his head. And that was just not normal behavior for them. They told us that they were like, childhood sweethearts. So we went there with Pat Schenberg, and again, we didn't have a lot of equipment. We had an old style video recorder, a full size VHS camcorder, which were very bulky things back then. And we set up equipment and so forth. And the thing that really amazed me was I think I had my first interaction in that home. I was walking through between the living room and the kitchen, and suddenly I walked into what I can best describe as, quote unquote, a zone of fear. It was like stepping into a little cubicle area, no more than maybe 2 feet by 2 feet. And you immediately got an anxiety attack. You got fearful. Your hair stood up on your arms. You got a chill. You got a charge. And I took another step or two, and I'm perfectly fine. I take a step backwards, I feel that again. And Pat Schenberg is right there, and I didn't say anything to her at first. She walked through it, and she experienced the same thing. But she also saw something there clairvoyantly. She saw a figure there, and he wasn't a nice person, according to what she said. So it was actually extremely close to where that wife threw that iron at her husband. So that resident spirit, whoever it was apparently not too happy that other people had moved into his home. He still was saying it was his home, even though he had died and apparently had moved on, or maybe he didn't move on. Maybe he was still inside the home. So that was one of my first experience that I could say that I really experienced something I had no scientific explanation for.
Wow, that's an incredible story. And it's somehow not possessed, but somehow triggered these feelings in humans that made them aggressive, more violent. That's really interesting. Well, what do you call that type of phenomena where it's not quite possession, but yet they're able to influence thinking?
Well, you'd almost consider that, almost oppression. Okay. It's not a possession. It's not an evil spirit. It's actually, in fact, I've never come across an evil spirit or a demonic spirit in all the work I've done.
Interesting.
I have found that people that die, this is my experience. These are my, my ideas, my hypotheses, if you will.
Sure.
That when people die, they take along their same personality to the other side. So if you were a very nice person, you'll be a nice ghost. If you were kind of a nasty person or an angry person, you're going to be an angry spirit. It's just the way it's going to be. Are they negative? Yeah, I guess you could say negative, but they're not demonic. They're not demons. They're people. They're spirits that haven't passed on. Maybe they're still claiming that space for themselves, and in one way, shape, or form, they're exuding some sort of energy that can maybe in some case drive the family apart. So the family will finally leave the abode. And maybe that's what they're doing it for. Now, in most cases, I will say that ghosts are not like that. Ghosts are not there to haunt a home. They're there because they haven't crossed over for whatever reason. And in some cases, they do interact with people. And in some cases, people can live with the ghost. But in this case, that family could not. And we were able to at least, Pat says she believed to convince that ghost to simply cross over. And that family never had any more problems after that.
Wow, that's an incredible story. I mean, did these experiences make you a more spiritual person? Like once you started to have these paranormal experiences that were super valid, did that make you more spiritual?
I think I always was somewhat religious. I mean, when we were growing up, we never missed a holiday. We went to, Palm Sunday, Ash Wednesday, Christmas, Easter, always went to church on every Sunday. So we were, we were religious. And of course, then I got a little bit more separated from the church. Normally when I'm doing investigations, you've heard the term separation of church and state. Well, we kind of do a separation of religion and the paranormal. We try to keep the religion out of the paranormal because so many people have different ideas what's on the other side or what spirituality all is. So we don't bring that usually into the field. But as you say, when I have these experiences, how do you explain something like that? How do you explain being touched or in some cases interacted with by spirits? I had all different types of touching and feeling sensations on my body, and not a lot of them. Maybe I can count on two hands how many I've had in 46 years. But you can't explain that, and I can't explain how that happens unless there's some person there, some spirit there, that is somehow, this is their only way to interact with you by touching you or by, making a sound or creating an odor or in some cases a visual apparition, which is by far the least reported way of experiencing ghosts. The most often is through sound. So very often people that have reports of activity will hear sounds rather than actually seeing something.
Really? So the actual touching, you're saying in all your cases in all these years, it's only been, under 10 times where you actually felt something grab you. But because of that, like you're saying, it does strengthen your understanding that there is something more than this. Like whatever it is, at least we know there's something outside of this life.
Oh, absolutely. I'm a firm believer that there's a God, there's a higher being, higher intelligence, higher deity, whatever you may want to call it.
Sure.
Nobody knows for sure. It's all really a matter of faith. But when you get involved in something where you're kind of touching on that fringe area of belief of the afterlife, because you're going after something that shouldn't be here. In any cases, in most churches teach that this, when you die, your spirit moves on. But in some cases, the spirit doesn't move on for whatever reason. And that's the area we are exploring, locations where there are spirits still there. Now, we don't, I have always said that when I was getting involved with this field, I chose a path, more or less. And the path I chose was to approach this in a scientific fashion through the use of paranormal equipment. In some cases, bring in psychics, which is a less tangible way of experiencing things because it's more of a subjective experience rather than something you can hold concrete in your hands. But I also kind of didn't want to I wanted to stray away from being where you go in and you're also trying to eliminate the ghost too. Through some sort of blessing, smudging, and all those different things, which I don't think actually work in my opinion.
Like the spirit removals.
We would go in there more or less to investigate, to gather evidence, to make contact, maybe find out who is there. And then if the client wants to take it to the next step, then I know people I can bring in that can perhaps convince the spirit to move on.
So once you diagnose the situation, when you're doing your initial investigation, once you make that diagnosis, then you know who to filter it to based on their area of expertise.
Exactly. We go into a location when I bring my team in, and I have 3 professional nurses. I have filmmakers. I have office workers. I have elderly people. I have young people in my group, and some of them have been in the group for as many as 25 years. When we go into a location, we kind of divide it into 3 phases. Phase 1, first of all, number one, I don't tell anybody that's coming in what's going on. So they have no idea what's going on except they're going to a house that's allegedly haunted.
Okay.
I'm the one that does the interview with the client over the phone or through a Zoom session or whatever the case may be. I document the evidence. I go through the history with her and so forth, and then I bring the team in. And they come in totally blind, which I think is more scientific, because then they have no preconceived notions of what's going on. They don't go to the creepy basement because that's where the client says the ghost is. They go through room to room and figure out with their equipment what's going on. So that's phase 1. You go through with clipboards in teams of 2 with a floor plan. And you go through one person holding a clipboard, one person using equipment. They go through, they try to get readings. fluctuations in EMF, temperature, whatever the case may be, or any experiences they have personally. They document those that we bring back in phase 2, and we sit down with the client. Now, before the client tells the group what she's experienced or he's experienced, I like to have the group tell the client what they've experienced. That way, the client's not putting any notions into my teams, if you understand what I'm saying.
Right.
So the team is just saying, well, this is what we experienced, and this is where we experienced, and this is what equipment fluctuated at. And then the client will then, when they're all finished, the client will then say, well, this is what's been going on. And then we see how closely it matches by what the client has experienced and what we have investigated. And I don't know why, I have no idea why, but more than 85% of the time we hit the spots in the home where activity is taking place, which amazes the client. How do you know that? Well, it's just other people experience the same stuff. We're getting readings, we're getting fluctuations, we're getting temperature variance. There's something going on here. So then in phase 3, we finally set up equipment, cameras, monitors, different types of equipment to register all different types of energies. We'll do EVP sessions. We'll do real-time voice communication. And then we go back and analyze all the data, set up a time for the client to go over the information with the client. And at that point, we can maybe explain what's going on. Maybe we've got some names that come through that are relevant to the client. And then it's up to the client at that point whether they want to take it further to, remove the ghost, or maybe they can coexist with the ghost. Because sometimes clients call us for 2 reasons. Number one, either they're completely terrified and scared and they want the ghost to be gone yesterday, or they're curious and they're just saying, well, maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a loved one. I want to make sure I'm not going crazy. Just come over here and let me know what's going on. But then when we find out what it is, and in some cases give her a name, give a name or his or her name. Oh wait, that's probably Uncle Joe or and Millie or something like that. And they're here, fine, leave them alone. We don't want them to leave. But if it's somebody, a stranger, we want the stranger out.
Oh, that's interesting.
That's kind of what we come through when we do our investigation. This is more or less into private homes and private businesses.
So after that 3-phase investigation, then you say you do ghost removals, but you don't like to do spirit removals, but it does happen occasionally?
What we try to do, what I like to say is this is the way we have done it in the past with psychics we've worked with. And we have had psychics that have actually worked on missing persons cases, Atlanta child murders, Janina Carrico and Melissa Ackerman murder cases here in Chicago. They've worked with police. They're professional psychics and criminologists, and they're not these telephone psychics you call for readings over the phone. These are legitimate psychics. So when we are called back in, perhaps to alleviate the phenomena in one way, shape, or form, we don't go in there to remove the ghost. And that's where what we do is quite different from what is on TV, because you see people going on there and they're trying to perform exorcisms, they're trying to do smudging with sage, sprinkling holy water. That's an attempt to drive the spirit out. Now, we have no right to drive a spirit out of a home that he or she loved when they were alive. That was their home as well. And why they're still there, maybe we can discover that through our EVP sessions. So what we like to do when we're there with psychics is to try to convince the ghost that is there to move on its own accord, to reach out to friends and loved ones on the other side who have already died, and to cross over that direction willingly, and not to cast them out. We don't believe in casting spirits out unless, if they're negative, then that's something, first of all, I wouldn't get involved with it anyway. I would, give that to a demonologist or the clergy to address. But if it's just a regular earthbound spirit, we just try to convince because again, going back to that scenario, many ghosts don't realize that they have passed on. So then if you can convince the ghost that they are in fact dead and they need to move on, many times they will simply move on. They will find the white light. They will find the passageway, if you will, to the other side. Maybe friends and loved ones will come out and reach out to guide them across. I've heard of this going on many times. We've had success in past cases in doing just that without doing any creepy mumbo jumbo or spooky rituals.
So what's some of the equipment you use to investigate these situations nowadays?
Well, we use a lot of different EMF meters. Now, EMF meters, electromagnetic field meters, will pick up deviations in electromagnetic fields. Again, if there is a surviving personality or a ghost or a spirit there of some kind, they have an energy. And that energy in many cases is a measurable energy that can be measured with equipment. Or in some cases, it will cause a deviation in normal electromagnetic fields. You might put a tri-field natural EM meter, which is the top of the line meter on the market, which doesn't pick up internal AC fields. So you don't get any false readings of internal fields, geomagnetic or electrical fields. When that meter settles down, and it's best used in a stationary mode, you find a location that's very active, you put it in there, you monitor it with a camera, or somebody will sit in the hallway and watch it. If that meter suddenly peaks and buries itself and then goes back to zero, well, what's just happened there? To my way of thinking, that we had something that crossed past that meter, a moving electromagnetic field, which is much more interesting than a static field.
Yeah.
A static field. Static field, if you would put a device like a K2 or a Mel meter and you're getting a steady 1.2, 1.3 or something, and it's just steady, most likely what you're picking up something in the environment, because it's a constant static reading. But if you get something that goes from zero to buries the needle and back to zero, that means something just moved right past that device, and that's what we look for.
Wow.
We also have other devices that pick up temperature variations, digital parameters that will give you an instantaneous reading. You have it's a wand attached to a very small filament. If you would put that filament into a freezer, it would instantly go to the freezer temperature, say 32 degrees. You pull it out, instantaneously it'll go back to 72 degrees. That quickly. So if you're walking through with this device and suddenly, all of a sudden, it goes from 70 degrees to like 54 degrees and then back to 70. Well, what just happened? You just walked through something. You walk through maybe a spirit, something that's being caused by a spirit, because many times they use the energies, the heat, the molecules in the air that are moving quickly together to cause friction, and they leave behind this cold spot. That's how cold spots normally are formed. We also use a lot of different cameras. We use digital cameras. We use night shot cameras. We use full spectrum cameras. We also use structured light censored cameras. They're called X-cams, and they're actually, you might have seen these on television, where it projects a field of invisible dots. If something shows up in that mapped out area, a spirit, something interacts with that, it'll show up as a stick figure. And we've actually had a lot of so-called stick figures appear in open doorways when there's nothing there to form a matrix.
Wow.
We've had other equipment like infrared binoculars we use. We use thermal vision cameras to see if anything picks up. Now, most thermal vision cameras are very misunderstood because people think that they're very useful in the paranormal. They're not, but they can be adapted. Thermal vision cameras will give you a contact reading. So if you turn the device on and you point it down a hallway, it's going to reflect off a door, a window, a floor, ceiling, a cabinet. That's the reading you're going to get. Now, can it pick up a spirit? Well, yes, if the spirit that moves through as you're filming has a considerable mass. If it has mass, then that mass can be analyzed through temperature. That's the same idea as when you set up a laser grid down a hallway and a shadow comes in and blocks some of the dots from the laser grid. Well, that has to have some sort of mass to interact and block those dots. So thermal vision camera can be used in that way, shape, and form. And we have a lot of real-time devices we use, like the obelisk, that has a built-in database and also has a phonetic mode. We use mini portals or spirit boxes that we use that quickly scan AMF and frequencies. We actually use a device, an application called the Phasma box, which is probably one of the most interesting ones we've ever used. We've gotten, and I think I've sent you some clips about us using the Phasma box, where entire sentences have come out in the response to questions that we've asked.
Yeah, they're incredible.
So we have a lot of scientific gear. In fact, presently right now, I have over $14,000 worth of paranormal equipment.
Wow. So, I mean, and over the years, I'm sure you've refined it, right? This is like in the over 40 years, you started with barely anything, and over the years, you've refined it. And I'm sure the stuff you have now is incredibly effective.
Yeah. What people don't understand a lot of times in the paranormal, if you go back far enough, say that if you go back to, say, even, I don't know, the mid-1980s, early 1990s. I mean, before that, there was hardly anything out there. Then all of a sudden, you started to get some devices that came on the market that weren't considered ghost hunting tools. Okay, they had other purposes. For instance, a gauss meter, a K2 meter, a cell sensor, an ELF zone meter. Now, those 4 or 5 really early, and even the magnetic field detector number 2, all those very early devices were used to detect high EMF fields in your home that could be dangerous to you, to the person. And they were used by professionals. They were used by engineers in case you were having headaches, you were hallucinating, because if you have high EMF in your environment, it can cause a condition called EMF hypersensitivity, which you can actually get skin irritation, rashes, hallucinations, and all kinds of strange things caused by that. So a lot of times people that have paranormal activity, if they have real high EMF fields in their home, that can sometimes be explained away by simply eliminating that source of those high EMF fields. So when those devices came out, ghost hunters were gobbling them up because, hey, they can also pick up other things. Well, sure they can. They might be able to pick up maybe the presence of a ghost or some sort of deviation in normal electromagnetic fields. However, those very early devices are sensitive to such a wide, broad area of EMF that they pick up other naturally occurring stuff. So when you get a reading with those early devices, you have to go back and say, well, wait a second. We got to figure out if we're picking up a spirit, if we're picking up something environmentally in the location we're investigating. Later on, as we moved further down into the 2000s and so, people began, very bright minds, Bill Chappell and others, began to devise equipment specifically for the use in paranormal research. And it had no other use, basically. It was designed for, generating fields, picking up cold spots, whatever. And that's, where, my equipment kind of progressed from. I mean, I had to pick up, just like everybody else, the very early stuff that came on the market. And as more and more sophisticated stuff came out, that earlier stuff we don't even use anymore. I mean, we still have it, but we don't use it. We use it now to pick up natural fields. So we take it in homes to see if there's something naturally going on in the environment that might be misinterpreted as a spirit.
Interesting. So you're saying that if there's too much electrical magnetic situations going on in a person's home, it could create some health effects.
Oh, absolutely. It's been well documented. Even government agencies have PDF files that you can download about that on their different websites and so forth. And you can actually, there are so many things that can cause, people to assume that there's something in the ghost. Even radon gas that built up inside basements that can be detected. We actually have radon gas detectors that can actually pick that up. If you get too much of that, you can think that you're seeing something. It's causing a hallucinogenic effect in some cases. And of course, you also have to go into the idea that, the people that you're involved with, they might be imagining this. They might be an alcoholic. They might be a drug user. They may be on, some mind-altering medication for their benefit of themselves, but that could be causing, activity. I give an example really quickly. I just got a call here not that long ago from a gentleman that was having all kinds of stuff going on in his house. Really crazy stuff. He was being attacked, physically punched in the stomach, knocked off his chair. Nobody else in the house, however, was experiencing anything except him. And as I just kind of went a little bit deeper, and I just kind of trying to be nice, I said, well, maybe it's just all in your mind, and kind of nicely said that. I said, do you have any because this is what we would ask anyway, do you have any conditions that might cause this? And the first thing that came out of his mouth, he goes, yeah, I'm schizophrenic and bipolar.
Gee, I wonder if that was an issue.
Yeah, so that to me right there, I said, well, when you tell me that and you're on medication and maybe you're not taking your medication correctly, I don't know, I'm not there. I said, I really don't think I'll be able to help you, because if nobody else is experiencing anything, it's only you, it's probably you. I'm trying to be as nice as I possibly can to people when they call, but It saves us a long trip to go out there to figure out that, that the person is off their medication or something like that.
Yeah, because I'm sure you do get contacted by people that have mental health issues and you don't have the resources to investigate everything fully. And it's a good idea to screen those things, because there are those people out there. But I do want to get back to what you said earlier, because I don't want it to slip away. Did you say that you kind of, in a way, subcontract out the darker calls, the demonic calls to clergy and people that handle those type of things? So you're saying those things exist, but you don't deal with them personally. Is that correct?
Well, I can't say for sure that they actually exist, okay, because I've never investigated them. The only thing I've seen is what everybody else sees on TV. And I always tell people, don't believe everything you see on TV, especially some of these ghost hunting shows, and I won't mention their names because I get too much hate mail as it is. But you can't believe everything you see on these reality TV programs. There may very well be. And if you look at the Catholic religion, for instance, you can go through their evidence. They said they've done exorcisms all across the country, all across the world. In fact, even the book The Exorcist was actually based on a true account of a boy, actually in Georgetown, that had this. And all over the country and all over the world, they've had these reports of demons and possessions and so forth. One of the reasons I have never come across anything like that is I carefully screen my cases. I kind of know what to look for in investigating as many cases as I have throughout the years. I can get a real feel for what people tell me with my questionnaire that I go through. I ask them just to tell in their own words, first of all, what's happening, try to put a chronology on it, what happened first, what happened next, what room, what time, what date, what day of the month. All this is very important because it could show some sort of parallel or even synchronicity or some pattern that could come out of this. And then later on, when they're all done telling me what they tell me, and I say, is that all? Then I would ask them questions, because I don't want to ask them questions at the beginning, because that you lead a person down a certain road, and then they have sometimes a tendency to, well, maybe my story is not so interesting, I'm going to embellish it a little bit. And that's when you get the falsehoods. You got to kind of weed through that. But by going through and screening these cases and then finding out kind of activity they're experiencing, what people have done in the home, for instance, maybe people have been out there and there had been a satanic cult out there. And maybe they've drummed up something. Maybe they've been playing with Ouija boards or automatic writing or seances and opened up doorways and caused this stuff to come in. Because when you do a seance, it's like picking up a telephone and dialing a phone number with your eyes closed. You don't know what you're going to get on the other end of the line. And a lot of times when this is often, I don't want to stereotype it, but a lot of teenagers use Ouija boards. And when they get scared, they just, they run and they don't close the session. It's like leaving the door open and these things can come in. In fact, if you remember The Exorcist, the very first stories began after the girl began communicating with a spirit on a Ouija board that was called Captain Howdy. And was a nice, friendly guy. And then it turned into scratchings that they heard in the attic, and they thought they were rats. And then there was bounces and knocks and all kind of stuff. So that can happen. And if I just through my own experience, if I believe that that there could be something very negative there, well, why would I want to bring my team there?
Right.
Okay. Because if the family's already having problems, you don't want to bring in 4 or 5, 6 more people and have them have problems, or maybe have an attachment of some kind come back with them. So I would rather, in that case, find somebody more seasoned in demonology, a demonologist, or even start off with the clergy, because usually that's what I tell people. Even if you're not religious, just tell your local pastor or priest that you want a house blessing or some prayers said in the home, and many times they'll just come out there. You don't have to tell the priest that you think the house is haunted. Just tell them that you want a house blessing. You just moved in and you want a blessing, and they'll come out there and you give them a donation of something. And many times that will solve the problem, but a lot of times it doesn't, because this is where we get into where people try to remove the ghost on their own. Give you a good example.
Okay.
Smudging using sage, which is a Native American Indian custom. If you're trying to use sage to get rid of a ghost, well, if the ghost is not a Native American Indian, they're not going to know what the hell you're doing. They're going to say, what's the smoke? This smoke's supposed to be for me to get out of the house. It's just like, it's very annoying. Think about that for a second. The same thing with a priest coming in, a Roman Catholic priest, sprinkling holy water, which is a Roman Catholic tradition. What if the ghost is not a Roman Catholic? It's an atheist. It's a Muslim. It's a Buddhist. They're going to say, well, what's this guy sprinkling water around? What's that going to do to me? You see, that's why you really need somebody to come in sometime to kind of get a feel for who the ghost is. And then you can, I won't say attack it, that's the wrong word, but attack the idea of later on trying to remove the ghost or trying to coax it to go on, because I don't like the term removal, by what the ghost actually is.
Well, that's really interesting.
Determine that.
Yeah, it's really interesting that they seem to line up with their religious and spiritual beliefs in their previous life, and the things that they didn't believe in or weren't resonant with don't affect them. That's really interesting.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't realize that, and that's when I see these people on TV, they right away, the first thing they go is they light some sage, they'll burn frankincense and all kind of strange herbs like that. Now, I will say that in some cases that has kind of cleared the environment of some negative energy. Okay, it kind of alleviates a little bit of that negativity. But it's not, in my opinion, this is again my opinion, I may get a lot of hate mail for this, but in my opinion, it doesn't get rid of a spirit. I mean, the only way you're going to get rid of a spirit is one of two ways. Usually exorcism, which I don't like to do and I won't do. That's left to the church. Or you convince it to move on like we do by using people on the other side to help them across. Now, if it's something negative, well, then if it's something like a demonic spirit, which is the definition of a demonic spirit, is something that has never walked the face in human form, face of the earth in human form. So it's not a spirit of a once living person. It's actually a fallen angel or a demon. Now, does that exist? I guess if you go by my religion, which is Catholic, the Catholic religion says there is a devil, there is a God, there are demons, there are fallen angels. Can they actually interact with us? Catholic Church says, yeah. I say I've never come across them. Doesn't mean that they're not out there. But I always want to make sure I don't get involved with something like that because it's beyond my expertise.
And it's probably for the best anyway. Like you said, why walk into a dangerous, potentially hazardous situation if you can avoid it and leave it to someone more that has more expertise in that field? But have you ever felt that any of these entities may be extraterrestrial or extra dimensional? Maybe not necessarily demons, but maybe something from another planet or another dimension? That's
interesting. Yes. The short answer to that is yes. And part of that is due to some of the readings I've done. Readings meaning reading books, not psychic readings.
Okay.
But I have read. I have a very extensive library that goes. I have some extremely rare books in my library, and one of my favorite authors for touching on what you just asked there is John Keel. John Keel wrote the Mothman Prophecies.
Okay.
Most famous book, but he wrote a ton of others: Strange Creatures in Time and Space, The Eighth Tower, Jadoo, Disneyland of the Gods. The list goes on and on and on. And I actually had a chance to meet him several times in person. He's an amazing guy. Now, he actually talks of what he calls ultra dimensionals. Okay, not ETs, but ultra dimensionals, indicating something coming through either a parallel universe or through a portal. And I am a firm believer that there are such things as portal hauntings. I've documented them.
Really?
I actually had a PowerPoint presentation that I gave a couple of years ago at a paranormal convention where I talked about these portal hauntings, like doorways opening up. I'll give you one good example.
Sure.
In Detroit, Michigan in 1946, or in the mid-1940s, 45, 46, they started to have what they would call a UFO flap. Now, flap meaning a number of reported sightings of unidentified flying objects in the Detroit area, reported by all manner of people, including first responders and police officers, seeing strange lights in the sky. Now, at that same time, if you go back in that time period and you read the Detroit newspapers during that time that flap was going on, you'll also find out that at the same time people were experiencing lights in the sky. They were seeing Bigfoot-type creatures. They were seeing hairy cryptids or something to that effect.
Interesting.
There was also numerous reports of poltergeist activity and even hauntings. Now, how do you explain all that happening at the same time? Well, I explain it as a portal, where in some cases the veil between our world and the next becomes so thin that it actually opens up a doorway or a portal. It can also be exacerbated by people in the area conjuring up stuff too, using seances, Ouija boards, satanic stuff, and conjuring up stuff through that thin dimension. And then all of a sudden, all the stuff stops. It stops almost the same day. All the UFOs, all the hauntings, all the poltergeists, all the Bigfoot stuff. You don't see a single report out there. It's like they all went back through the door and the door closed. John Keel investigated the Point Pleasant, West Virginia Mothman sightings in 1966. He said there was so much activity out there. He actually came through a similar area in a TNT factory where supposedly this Mothman, this huge winged creature with glowing red eyes was seen. And he walked into something similar to what I walked into that home where I had my first paranormal experience. What he calls a zone of fear. And that's where I get that term, so I have to attribute it to John Keel. He's no longer with us. But the zone of fear, where he walked into it, he got this anxiety attack, and he walked a few feet away, and then he was fine. He walked back, and he got that. And it was crazy. He came back the next day, and it was gone. It wasn't there anymore. He also went to interview people about the Mothman. And when he arrived there, the people would say, "You're back again?" He goes, "I never was here." He goes, "Yes, you were. You were here yesterday. You interviewed me." It was a doppelganger, a double image. A guy that looked exactly like, or was John Keel, went and interviewed these people before John Keel got there. Extremely rare, called a doppelganger.
Whoa.
That's where the idea of the Men in Black came from. That happened also. These black Cadillac sedans would pull up with Men in Black, sometimes Oriental-looking, dark sunglasses, really long fingers. They almost had a Chinese appearance. They would convince people you didn't see what you saw. And then, all the Mothman sightings. And just before, as you know, there was the disaster, the Silver Bridge collapse, and all those people, fell into the river in their car. Just before that happened, there were reports of strange lights over the bridge. So that to me is another extremely portal haunting that took place out there. And there was activity as far as some poltergeists and hauntings going on at the same time. And then all of a sudden, 18 months later, everything went back to normal.
So you think the portal closed at that point?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, man.
You can go through and you can look at reports across the country in different states, different cities. And I would bet that you find several different types of portal hauntings within each state. I mean, there's several right here in Illinois that I've actually investigated as well. Bachelor's Grove being a portal hauntings, that cemetery.
Can that
happened there?
Can that be your next book? Portal hauntings. I'm like fascinated by this right now. My brain's just like sparkling. I want you to write that as your next book, please.
Yeah, I should. I've been thinking about that. Actually. I've been putting a lot of research in there, and since my PowerPoint presentation that I had a few years back, I've actually found several more that I'm currently researching myself. Through the help of other investigators that have been out there in the past, through research on the internet, through my library, and also libraries in the area, I can really put together a pretty interesting book.
Well, what about angels and angelic entities? Like, you felt these other types of entities, but what about the very high, very loving, the deep energy of the angels?
I have not felt anything like that myself, but I have been involved in cases where I believe the people believe that they had guardian angels that helped them out, again, in times of trouble or times of need. Now, when you say guardian angels, are you talking really about an angelic being, or are you talking about somebody who has passed over a friend or a loved one who is acting like a guardian angel? That's where we're not really quite sure. But there have been reports of people, of course, having great fear, great anxiety because of negative spirits. But on the flip side of the coin, you have a lot of people that have also felt great joy, great happiness, great a peaceful feeling because of the spirits that are there, and maybe they are a higher level angelic type being. I mean, if again, going back to my Catholic upbringing, we believe that there are angels and there are devils. So if there's something negative, there can be also something positive as well.
Right, for sure. I mean, you can feel it. It seems like that polarity exists for a reason. A lot of the spiritual people I talk to have different paths, different walks of life. They all talk about these angelic entities and also talk about the polarity, the flip side, those demonic type entities.
Yeah, I have a number of books in my library about angels, and of course I have a few books on demonology, because even though I don't get involved with that, I still need to be kept abreast of what's going on in that field. So if I do come across something, I can always refer back to the books or my readings. Sure. And determine maybe what we're getting involved with when we accept the case.
So, I mean, with all of these cases that you've had, are there any messages that maybe some of these entities have tried to get across that wasn't necessarily for a person singularly or for the people investigating, but maybe some sort of greater message for humanity or some kind of overarching message? Has that ever happened?
Well, we seem to one of the most the one word that seems to come through most often when we're doing any type of EVP sessions, ghost box, obelisk, phonetic mode, mini portals, phasma box, whatever the case may be, is the word help. We get that more than any other word.
Oh, God.
So is it that the people that are maybe haven't crossed over are asking for help? Because it's very clear, these helps. And I mean, I got, umpteen recordings, many of you can see on my website from places all across the country where help will come through. Or if we ask if it needs help, and they'll say yes. And in some cases, we try to to ask, the spirits, that haven't crossed over. And again, that idea that there are spirits that have crossed over that can come back to, look out for people and drop in and so forth. What's it like on the other side? What does the other side look like? And we don't get much of a response for that, unfortunately. Sometimes we'll get a response. It'll say beautiful, or it'll say peace, or white, or light, or something like that. Not really a definitive answer, but kind of that idea of what people might experience when they cross over. And kind of getting off the subject just for a second here.
Oh, sure.
When another thing that kind of really disturbs me a little bit, I guess, would be when people or psychics or investigators try to convince the spirit to move on. They will tell them to look for the light, go to the light. If you remember the movie Poltergeist, that little short psychic that was in that movie, she would say, go to the light, my children. There's peace surrounding in the light.
Right.
Well, that may well be true, but here's the catchphrase. And this is my hypothesis that I've been kicking around for many years now. We know what spirits look like to us. Okay, we see them in spirit photographs. We see them in documentaries. Sometimes we see them in our own eyes. But what do we look like to a spirit? Okay, we don't know. We can't answer that until you become a spirit yourself. Do we look like we look like now? Or do the spirits only see the energy in our body, which is a white light? So to the spirits, we might look like a white light. So by saying, go to the light, you might be telling the spirit that's there to go and attach itself to the nearest living person.
Interesting theory. Yeah, I've never heard that one before.
And so we don't use that, obviously, when we're trying to. And again, I don't do it personally. If we have somebody who wants to take it to the next step, it would be a psychic that would come in. I would be there also to observe, to document, to videotape with the equipment and so forth, and then to do readings afterwards to see if there's anything still there. But it would be left pretty much in the hands of the psychic or the medium that we bring in to do that at that point, or somebody who is very intuitive. So they would be the ones that would be trying to cause the spirit to move on through its own accord, willingly, and reaching out to the other side, and then not using that go to the light. None of my psychics I've ever worked with have ever used the word go to the light. And when I started to see these other motion pictures, and I love the movie Poltergeist. The first one was actually kind of cool, even though it wasn't a poltergeist. It was a haunting going on there. There was poltergeist-like type activity, okay, movements of object, but they were caused by a spirit, which would be called teleportation and not poltergeist. And that's another thing that irks me a little bit. Sometimes people get that wrong.
But it has the cool name, so that's why they probably went with that.
Exactly. That was a cool name. But that first one was cool. And of course, then Poltergeist 2, Poltergeist 3, and then when they kind of got crazy after that. So it was, the first one's always the best. And when you try to do a volume 2, volume 3, it never really turns out, like the first one.
But do you think that the light is what you see when you die? Because there's so many people that have had near-death experiences that talk about going towards the light, but maybe that's like a diversion. Maybe they shouldn't go for the light. Maybe they should go for something else. And like you said, maybe the spirits see us as light. There's just so much going on that we don't know there.
Well, Dr. Michael Persinger, who has quite a bit of experiences in what they call near-death experiences, where people have actually been declared clinically dead for several minutes in some cases. And sometimes the people that are clinically dead that are later revived will tell things like they're floating over their body, and they're seeing the doctors frantically working on their body, and nothing's happening. And all of a sudden they'll see this, again, I call it a portal, but an opening with a tunnel of white light and beautiful music, and it's not scary. And people start going down that tunnel. And then down there, they start to see shapes. They start to see familiar faces that have passed on. and then they get to nearly get to the other side, and then maybe they're revived, or perhaps in some cases their loved ones say, and this has been told over and over again, it's not your time. Go back, finish your work here on Earth, and then all of a sudden they're revived. So, I mean, that's, I think, is a little bit different from, I think, our soul, if you will, or our energy in our body. I don't think it's going to be that big of a white light. It could be a smaller little white light. We don't know. Again, it's just my theory.
Yeah.
But, the whole idea of going to the other side has been in a lot of different paranormal talks and movies and documentaries. We just don't know. We don't know what it is. I mean, some people, like if you remember the movie Ghost with Patrick Swayze, when after he died, he saw this light, but he was afraid of it. He didn't know what it was. First of all, he didn't even know he was dead until he came back and saw his dead body being held by his fiancée, Demi Moore. And then he goes, what's going on here? And then he saw the light. The light was coming for him, basically, or showing him the way to come out. He didn't want to go. He got scared and he ran away. And then later at the end of the movie, as he was contacted by, the psychic, or the woman that was Whoopi Goldberg, who was being able to talk, said that's your way out. And then it came from him, and he was kind of absorbed by that light. Now, is that actually how it happens? We don't know. Again, they may have, and this is what I look for too. People say, well, why are you sitting here watching all the credits? The movie's over. Let's go, right? No, I watch for people who are technical advisors to the movie. And in many cases, they are people in the paranormal field. Investigators, like myself and others who have actually done stuff. I was actually slightly involved as a technical advisor for the movie Shutter when it first came out. That was actually contacted, and they actually wanted to know my opinion on certain things, certain aspects of the movie, because they wanted to make it as realistic as possible. So they actually contacted people who had been into photography, like I had been for at that time, almost more than 30 years. So I think, as I said, people in the Hollywood are trying to make it as realistic as possible. There may be some shock scenes and so in the movie, but that's just for entertainment purposes and keep you on the edge of your seat. But the realistic possibility, they always try to reach out to people that have had experiences themselves or investigate.
Oh, that's really cool. That you got. Did you get a credit for that actually? Like on the credits?
No, I didn't actually. But I mean, I actually got. There was a write up in an article. And I believe there was something in some of the initial flyers that went out that had mentioned my name on it.
Well, that's really cool. But hey, listen, Dale, we talked about EVPs and you sent me some incredible EVPs. So I want to get to the EVP portion of this episode. This is going to be absolutely incredible, people, because Dale has sent me some of the EVPs that he's recorded with the equipment that he described earlier in this episode. And I want to play some of these for you. And I think you're going to be absolutely blown away. But I need Dale to tell me a little bit about where he got these. So let's start with the first one that we're going to do. And this is Get Out at St. Mary's. Now, can you give me a little backstory about this? Which St. Mary's is this?
Sure. St. Mary's Hospital, sometimes called Mercy Hospital in Gary, Indiana. It was a location that the entire Michael Jackson family was born, believe it or not.
Okay.
And now it's a rundown area. It's part of the Gary Police Department. In fact, their locker room is where the old morgue used to be, which is kind of cool. But we actually got permission twice to go in there by the Gary Police, and they actually went through and they made sure there was nobody in before we got there. For this EVP, there are 5 floors, and I had turned on this obelisk. The obelisk, as I mentioned, is a word-generating device, but if you put it in what's called phonetic mode, it allows the spirits to form their own words, putting together vowels and consonants to form words, and then putting those words into full sentences. I had this in my top pocket. We were walking up 5 flights of stairs. It didn't say a darn thing. until we got to this room that was filled, what I thought was floor to ceiling with patients' records. Talk about a HIPAA violations. I mean, they were like all over the place, and we didn't walk in, we didn't touch anything. But I like to sometimes, with permission, take something from the place I'm at. And I got a nice little museum in part of my basement for all the places I've been to, and I got some amazing stuff. Buildings that are no longer even there. And so the person that was filming was my videographer, Joe Tito. And he goes, wow. In fact, it was a video, which is kind of cool. And you can actually see the video if you go to my site. So we're walking in total darkness with the night shot. He pans into this room, and he sees his floor to ceiling of boxes. And he goes, wow, look at all those patients' records. You want to take some? He was going to say, do you want to take one of those like for your collection? And before he got the words out of his mouth, the obelisk says, get out of here.
Oh my God. Okay, people, here we go. We're going to listen to this. This is at St. Mary's. Listen for the get out. Here we go.
Wow. All the records. Mm-hmm. Oh, take some of those. And take some of that for your. Did it just say get out of here? That's what it sounded like to me. Did it?
Sounded like.
Oh my.
Sorry, I was just.
Oh my God. Let's go back. Let's back that up a little bit. Here we go. Let's hear it. It sounds like a robot voice, like a speak and spell or something, but clearly it says get out of here.
There's a speech synthesizer in this device, and it's affected by EMF. So the spirits are able to take their energies and manipulate the device to pull out either the appropriate word in the dictionary or to create their own words in the phonetic mode. And it does sound robotic because it's a speech synthesizer.
Wow. Okay, so let's hear that again. Here we go.
Some of that for your.
Whoa.
Did it just say get out of here? That's what it sounded.
Did you hear that? Oh my God. Let's hear that again.
Oh, take some of those. And take some of that for your.
Oh.
Did it just say get out of here? That's what it sounded.
Oh my God. That was pretty clear.
I said, it didn't say a single word until we got up to that room. And after it said that, it shut up for pretty much almost the rest of the night, except it did say something that came through later on. But, that was so right on schedule. I mean, there's no mistaking what it's saying.
Wow. Yeah. You could clearly hear it say, get out of here. It's not even a question. But the next one that we're going to play, you labeled more than 100. And tell me about this one.
Okay, we were in Goshen, Indiana. We were at a meet and greet, and there was two small cemeteries that they said were possibly haunted. But when they say cemeteries, there's no stones, there's no markers. All it was like a little opening, and they had McConaughey Cemetery, and there was a wooded area. So we were using the Phasma box, and the Phasma box is a application that you can use on your tablet or a laptop. It has to be a Windows-based system. You can't use it on your phone. It uses a reverb and echo effect mixed with a internet radio and sound banks. And so I asked the question simply, well, how many graves are here? Because there was no stones, and there was a short pause, and then it says, a voice comes through, and it says, more than 100.
Oh, my God. Okay, so let's listen to this one, people. We're listening for more than 100. Here we go. Wait. Here we go.
People are buried here.
Oh, my.
Over 100. Did you hear that?
Yeah. That was very.
And let's hear this one again, because that just gave me chills. Every time I listen to this, I instantly get chills because it's so perfectly clear. Here we go.
How many people are buried here? Over 100. Did you hear that?
Yeah. That was very.
Holy cow. That is, that's. Oh, my.
Over 100. Did you hear that?
Yeah.
That is so clear and perfect. And you said that that's the Phasma box that does that?
That's the Phasma box. See, I initially thought it said over 100, but when we listened to it with headphones, it said more than 100. But the other two women that were with me, part of my group, they both heard at the same time, and you heard the other woman say, repeat what it had said. So she heard it clearly. And this is what I love about these real-time devices. When you use obelisks, ghost boxes, Phasma boxes, if you get a response, then you can build upon that response and ask another question.
Wow. Okay, so what about this next one? You labeled "It Doesn't Work."
This is even creepier. We were in a place called the Elgin Casket Factory, which actually at one time built caskets. And around Halloween, they dressed it up to us a place for people to get the bejesus scared out of them by dressed up in bloody outfits. So they have a lot of stuff up there for effect only. So they had a fuse box on the wall that was kind of dripping with blood. It was not real blood, by the way. And it wasn't connected to anything, okay? So it was just there for the effect. Now, just as we stopped there, because they told us there was some activity taking place. So we started to use this SLS camera, which picks up the stick figures, and they said, my assistant said, there's a figure standing right by that box, and he's touching that box. And I look at the thing, I said, sure enough. So I said, okay, if you're there, something to the effect, if you're there, turn one of those switches, turn that box on. And he says, it doesn't work.
Oh, God. Okay, here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, here we go. It doesn't work.
Turn one of the switches.
Why?
It doesn't work.
Oh, my God.
I said, turn one of the switches. It doesn't work.
That's pretty good.
Very good. That was good.
Oh, my God. That gave me the chills. Let's listen to it again. We got to hear it twice. Because you hear it the first time, it's almost like you can't believe it because it's so creepy. But here we go. It doesn't work.
Turn one of the switches.
Why?
It doesn't work.
Oh, my God. Let's hear that again.
It doesn't work.
Oh.
There you go.
Turn one of the switches.
Woo!
That's pretty good.
How do you...
That was good.
Are you numb at this point, Dale? When you have these experiences and you hear these voices, are you numb at this point, or are there things that still shock you and scare you?
Stuff that still shocks me. When I first started to use the ghost box, I said, well, what you just picking up? You're just picking up radio chatter. You're picking up stuff that's bleeding through the radio. But then when you're doing something very fast, scanning extremely fast, and when you're going, and each is a station, how do you get a whole sentence coming through? So as you begin to tune your ear, so you'll be able to, at first you don't really hear much. When you first try it the very first time, you go, it just sounds like radio, scanning. And then you begin to hear these voices that come through. Same thing with the Phasma box. Now, when you start getting, you might get a word or something, but when you start getting a word that answers what you just asked, or in this case, full sentences coming through in the Phasma box, how do you explain that? I can't.
Oh, man, it's clear what it is. I mean, we know as intuitive people, as spiritual people that have had experiences that are outside of the third dimension, it's old news to us. I wouldn't say old news, but it's nothing we haven't experienced. But for a lot of people that haven't had these experiences, it's pretty shocking. And they probably want to be in denial about it because it's so scary. So the next clip we're going to listen to is Almost Made It, Need Power. Can you tell me about that one, Dale?
Yeah, this is kind of sad. We have investigated for several years in a row the location of crash flight 191 that crashed right after takeoff in O'Hare Airport and killed all 271 people on board, including a couple people on the ground. So we went there on May 25th, and we got there. We wanted to get there before 3:05 p.m., which is the time of the crash. And we were using a ghost box, an SB7, and was scanning as fast as we could. And I forget what I asked, but I was asking questions specifically to try to get names. And we actually did get some creepy names and so forth, and some very interesting responses. But then we got these the voice of this two gentlemen, and it's not as clear as I would like it, but it's still very clear. If you think of what they were going through trying to struggle this airplane that had no hydraulics. They had lost all the hydraulics and they were doomed pretty much. They only were got to about 300 feet above the ground. A voice comes through and says, almost made it, which is interesting because when they later looked at this, the crash and everything, they said it was remarkable that he kept it in the air as long as he did. And then it said right after that, need power. You needed more power to try to get up. So that's very, very relevant to where we were at.
Okay, so here we go, people. This is it. Almost made it. Need power. This is what we're listening for. Here we go.
How about the flight engineering?
So that one, you're using the radio frequency scanner, it sounds like, where it's going through all the radio frequencies as fast as it possibly can.
Right. But as I mentioned, each is a radio station. So you might be able to get like, because you're scanning very fast, but when you get almost made it, and it's the same voice, it's the same male that later says need power, okay, if you're scanning, if by theory you're saying that this is the radio that's being picked up, then that voice would have to be over several stations to put together to make that voice, which to me is just impossible. What I think is happening here is the spirits are speaking in between the white noise, in between the channels, and using the white noise as the amplitude modulator.
Really? Okay, so they're able to push through those almost use the radio signals as a piggyback, and then get their information in between the when it drops out.
Yes.
Okay, so the next one we're going to listen to is you labeled geriatrics. Can you tell me about that one?
Okay, this was we were at Old South Pittsburgh Hospital in South Pittsburgh, Tennessee. And it's an old rundown hospital. It was closed in 1995. And we were there all night. In fact, we were able to sleep in the patient's rooms, which is pretty cool. We had cameras set up all night. And we were going to start an EVP session. We were all sitting down in the geriatrics hallway. Okay. And we turned the Diabolus on, and I think you'll hear the Diabolus go through the various modes here. And then all of a sudden, it just says geriatrics.
Okay. So this is what we're listening for, people. We're listening for the ghost telling us the word geriatrics. Here we go. Oh. I heard it. I heard it around the 6-second mark. It said geriatrics very clearly. Okay, let's listen to that again. Oh, I heard it. Geriatrics. Here, one more time. Wow. It's interesting that they push through with these random statements sometimes just to let you know that they're there.
If you notice on that particular clip right there, when it said geriatrics, the background has stopped. It's like it pushed through, and that it was gone. All of a sudden, it goes geriatrics, and then it goes right after.
I did notice that the noise seemed to drop out there.
Exactly, because it was using, I believe it was using the white noise, and a lot of researchers, including Sarah Estep from the American Association for Electronic Voice Phenomena, AAEVP, would often use white noise or pink noise in the background when she was recording or trying to contact spirits, because she believed the spirits could use that to amplify their voice, like you say, piggyback on top of that.
Wow. Yeah, it's pretty mind-blowing. I mean, that seems like common sense, but what's really weird is that on the other side, these beings know how to do that somehow, that they're able to understand that they can project their energy in that way. It's really interesting.
Well, that's what when we're doing these sessions, we try to bring it down to their level. Okay. Because and this is what I see on TV all the time. You'll hear somebody in a haunted house that may be going back to the 1800s, and they'll say, you see, go over and touch that Mel meter. Well, they don't know what a millimeter is, right?
Right.
You got to say, see that black box over there. Now, they know what a black box is. Touch that black box. Or talking to that digital recorder. Well, they don't know what a digital recorder, but talking to that red light, and they'll know what it is. The same thing with, using, the obelisk. I mean, we put this little black box down there. They said that black box, if you manipulate that black box, or if you use that black box, or if you touch it, we'll be able to hear your voice. So we kind of instruct them what to do. And sometimes initially we'll get a lot of junk that comes through at first, which is an indication like they're like a child with a new toy. They're trying to play with it to try to get some words to come through to make sense. And then all of a sudden, intelligence begins to come out. Then questions begin to get answered. Then full sentences come out. We notice that all the time.
Okay, and the next one we're going to listen to is titled Therapy. So can you tell me about that one?
Okay, I believe both of these last two were taken at Waverly Hills Sanitarium in Louisville, Kentucky. We investigated that several times. We were in, of course, Waverly Hills was a tuberculosis sanitarium, and many people died in there. A lot of people died. And we were trying to communicate with spirits. We were using what they call a mini box, or a Frank's box. And Rosemary Ellen Guiley, who had been with my team, and I'd known her for more than 30 years, she was there with us. Unfortunately, she died just a couple of years ago. But she was using that along with different devices that were there. And these voices came through. And again, this is a tuberculosis sanitarium, a hospital. And you get this voice that comes through that simply says, needs therapy.
Ooh. Ooh. Okay, so here we go, people. We're going to listen for this. We're listening for needs therapy. Here we go.
I love it.
New therapies.
Whoa.
I love it.
New therapies.
Wow, you can hear that about the 6-second mark here. Let's listen again.
New therapies.
It sounds like somebody saying, I need therapy.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh my God.
It's so amazing. Now, again, this is similar. This is like before the SB7 came out. These were called Frank's boxes or Joe's boxes. And whoever made the box, they named it with their first name. Frank Sumption was the first guy that came up with the ghost box. And these, again, scan AM, FM frequencies, but they scan so fast. How would you get need therapy, all that coming through as fast as that thing is scanning? You can hear the scan in the background, the kind of noise between the white noise. And I think what we're picking up, and if we're picking up radio stuff, that's just crazy. Because, again, we're in a tuberculosis sanitarium and we got stuff that's relevant to being in a hospital.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about the mathematic numbers behind it, the synchronicity, the potential of something like that happening, I mean, that in itself, even if it was not a ghost or entity, would be astronomically mind-blowing. So like the math just doesn't add up. What seems more likely is that you're picking up these spirits. And we got one more. I don't know if it's the grand finale because they've all been so amazing, but this is one that says medical care. So is this something you captured in the same place at the same time?
This was in the exact same location. I'm not sure if this was the first or the second one, but again, you'll hear the voice of Rosemary Ellen Guiley, and she's saying what she's got set up here, and blah, blah, blah. And she had picked up stuff here in the past because she had been there many times in the past. I think we were there 3 times at Waverly Hills. And towards the end, all of a sudden, you have this voice that says,
something about medical care.
Yeah, needs medical care. Yeah.
Needs medical care. Okay, people, let's listen to this one. We're listening for needs medical care. Here we go. Whoa. Whoa. Wow. So let's hear that one more time.
Medical
That's mind blowing. It gives you chills.
Exact same voice. It's the exact same voice as the guy that says needs therapy.
Yeah. And to be honest, Dale, I thought he said, I need therapy.
Yeah.
And then he said, I need medical care, or medical care is what you picked up. And it's, right. Oh my God. So somebody's having this traumatic experience. They think they're still in this hospital and they need treatment. They're just trapped. They're trapped. That's, gosh, man. That is a lot to process.
And that's really, actually, it's kind of sad thinking that after all these years, and in some cases centuries, that there's still things there hanging around. Places like Gettysburg, places in England that go back even further back than our history. They got spirits back there of King Henry VIII and things like that, like Tower of London. It's just crazy that you think that they're still around. And what's even sadder, and maybe we can do another one of these sessions in the future. I have actually voices of children. That to me is extremely sad. Some actually calling out for their parents, calling out for mommy and so forth.
That's heartbreaking.
It tugs at your heart that they're still there. And, those are the ones that, when we go to these places, we're told by the people that own the venue, you can't do any cleansing or clearing because that's how they make money. But, sometimes I almost like to just go there with a psychic and just say, hey, there's this child here. See if you can point the child to where it needs to go.
Wait a second, Dale. Did you just say that some of these places do not allow the spirit to be sent to the next place because they're making money off of it?
Exactly. And I won't mention, but a lot of them will say in their disclaimer and in their rules, no cleansing, no Ouija boards, no spirit removal or whatever they call it when you're you're supposed to be there to enjoy it, to get, to talk to the spirits. But leave them there because we got other people coming that want to experience that too.
That seems almost like torture, like slavery in a way. It's terrible.
But again, I truly believe that the spirits there, and generally spirits that are trapped, they have their own free will. They can come, they can go as they please. I mean, that's why sometimes when people get involved with, I don't like to call it, it's a term that's used, but I don't like to use it, called spirit removal. When they do that and they say, well, the spirit's still here. Well, I mean, if the spirit is a surviving personality, it's really attached to this location or attached to a person, say, hey, what's your father? And your father's looking in. And why would you want to drive your father away? Or your father's going to say, hell no, I still want to stay here for a while. So they have their own free will. So even in the places like, Waverly Hills or other places that are public venues that are haunted, and they're all over the country, by the way, the Queen Mary Sloss Furnace, and you name it, they don't have to stay there. Okay, that's their choice to stay there, though, too.
Okay.
I mean, sure, the venue is going to make money. Sure. And even if there wasn't spirits there, it's still a creepy place to be in the middle of the night, with your equipment and doing stuff like that for other people. But I think they have their own self-interest. If they want to move on, they can move on.
Wow, it just seems like exploitation. I guess that's really just what it feels like. Yeah. It doesn't feel good internally. But you did mention that you went to England. When you did go there, did you find anything in your paranormal research?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I was there twice. I was there in 1985 and 1987. 1985, I actually was there with a very small group of people. I think 4 people, and then the driver and the guide. And the guide was Tom Parrott at the time. He was chairman of the Ghost Club, and later I became an honorary lifetime member of that very prestigious organization that had members like Sir Arthur Conan Doyle and Sherlock Holmes and Peter Underwood and many other very famous British society group people. And we were actually able to take a 2-week tour of haunted locations, spending the night in haunted locations, had extreme access to dining with royalty. We dined with baron and baronesses, and really it was just amazing going in some of these places. Now, we had a couple of really strange experiences. I didn't really have anything except a few feelings here and there. But I remember in one place we were spending the night at this gentleman that was with us from New York. His name was Robert. I won't mention his last name, but he was up there and he didn't have a bathroom in his room. So he had to go across to use the shower. And then he would come back wrapped in his robe and towel and everything. And as he came back from the bathroom, we were already downstairs getting ready for breakfast, and we're waiting on him. And all of a sudden, this grown man screamed top of his lungs. And of course, we all went flying up the stairs. And this guy's literally, he's white as a ghost. He wasn't the kind of guy to me that looked like he would really get upset. And he said, I saw this woman in white drift across the hallway and run into one of the rooms. That was pretty cool. And at Barry Pomeroy Castle, we had one of the people that was with us, also from New York. Her name was Brittany, and she was a psychic. And the story was that there was two women that they were sisters, that they were in love with the same guy, and that's never a good scenario. So the older sister apparently somehow locked her younger sister in the dungeon. She starved to death in the dungeon. And then, of course, the older, and they looked very similar. So it was almost like they were twins. So the guy didn't really know he was going out with the right girl or whatever. And there's been reports of that female on the top of the ramparts beckoning people to come in.
Oh,
and
man.
as we got out of the car, she looks over there and she goes, I'm feeling something really bad. And she went back in the car and locked herself in the car. So, yeah, we had some crazy stuff. Again, back in '85, I didn't have a lot of equipment. I couldn't bring a lot of equipment, on a plane to London and to do all that traveling. But I took a lot of pictures. We did have a few personal experiences here and there. I'd love to go back one day with some of the equipment I got now and set up some stuff. We actually went to Highgate Cemetery, where the legends of the Highgate vampire back in the 1980s and early 1990s. This creature that was attacking people near Swains Lane, a road called Swains Lane.
Okay.
There was a number of books written about that, including one by David Ferrant, I believe. There was actually a gentleman that actually thought there were real life vampires out there, and he was actually going into cemetery at night, breaking into crypts and driving wooden stakes in people's hearts.
Because he actually thought he was fighting these vampires and they were real.
Right. And he actually got arrested for grave desecration of a corpse.
He might have went a little bit too far. But Dale, thank you so much for being on the show. It's been an amazing episode. We're definitely going to have you back. We've got more EVPs to listen to. We've got more things to talk about. You've had decades worth of experiences and so many stories yet to be told. But I do want to tell people where to find you. So we can find you at ghostresearch.org. That is the website where you can be found. You can find some of the EVPs. Some of the EVPs we listened to today might be there, but there's a bunch that aren't. So you can go there and check that out. And he has books that are available. Windy City Ghosts 1 and 2. You can definitely get a hold of those. A Field Guide to Spirit Photography, Illuminating the Darkness, The Mystery of Spook Lights. Field Guide to Ghost Hunting Techniques, and Field Guide to Haunted Highways and Bridges. And of course, if you're interested, you can start your own local branch, and you're looking for people to do that. Is that correct?
Absolutely. In fact, we do still accept members here in the Chicagoland area. We got a lot of things planned for this year, including a trip to Gettysburg, a trip to the Buddy Holly crash site, the Belichtha Axe House, Farrar School, trip to Tennessee, and a lot of places locally here in Illinois and Indiana.
So if you join the Ghost Research Society, you will then be able to participate in these field trips to these amazing locations.
Absolutely.
Oh, well, if you're in the Chicagoland area, you better check it out, because if I was there, I'm in Portland, Oregon, but if I was there, I'd already be a member. So there's no doubt about that. But thank you so much for being here, Dale. Is there anything you want to leave people with before we go?
Well, the last thing I would just say is that if you do have an encounter with a ghost, if you think you have something going on, first of all, just realize that ghosts can't harm you. There haven't been that many reports of any actual physical harm. Try to document what you can. Try to call out to a professional team and make sure that any team that comes in doesn't charge you, because we don't charge for our work. You shouldn't have to charge for investigating somebody's house. But remember that spirits come and go. And they're not harmful. They often are just friends and loved ones or people that lived in the house before you.
That's right. So you don't necessarily need to be terrified. You don't need to be scared. You don't need to have these preconceived notions about them being evil. They could just be a benign or even happy spirit that are there to be with you in that space.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, Dale, please hold on the line while we play the outro music. And everyone, we'll see you next week. Midnight on Earth.